King Vashti deposed. Chapter 1. This is what happened during the time of Xerxes, who ruled over 127 provinces stretching from India to Kush. At that time, King Xerxes reigned from his royal throne in the citadel of Susa, and in the 3rd years of his reign, he gave a banquet for all his nobles and officials, the military leaders of Persia and the Media, the princes and the nobles and officials. The military leaders of Persia and the Media, the princes and the nobles of the princesses were present. For full 180 days he displayed the best wealth of his kingdom, and the splendor and the glory of his majesty. When these days were over, the king gave a banquet lasting 7 days in the enclosed garden of the king's palace, for all the people from the least to the greatest who were in the citadel of Susa. The garden had hangings of white and blue linen, fastened with cords of white linen and purple material, 2 silver rings on marble pillars. There were couches of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of purple marble, mother of pearl, and other costly stones. Wine was served in gourds of gold, each one different from the other, and the royal wine was abundant, in keeping with the king's liberality. By the king's command, each guest was allowed to drink with no restriction, for the king instructed all the wine stewards to serve each man what he wished. King Vashti also gave a banquet for the women in the royal palace of King Xerxes. On the 7th day, when King Xerxes was in high spirits from wine, he commanded the 7 eunuchs who served him, Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abgata, Zetar, and Caracas, to bring before him Queen Vashti, wearing royal crown, in order to display her beauty for the people and the nobles. For she was lovely to look at. But when the attendants delivered the king's command, King Vashti refused to come. Then the king became furious and burned with anger. Since it was customary for the king to consult experts in matters of law and justice, he spoke with the wise men who understood the times, and were closer to the king: Kasena, Shetar, Adamas, Tarashis, Meres, Marshana, and Memucan, the 7 nobles of Persia and Media, who had special access to the king and were highest in the kingdom. According to law, what must be done to King Vashti? He asked. She has not obeyed the command of King Xerxes that the eunuchs have taken to her. Then Memucan replied, in the presence of the king and the nobles, King Vashti has done wrong, not only against the king, but also against all the nobles and the peoples of all the provinces of King Xerxes. For the king's conduct will become known to all the women, and so they will despise their husbands and say, King Xerxes commanded King Vashti to be brought before him, but she would not come. This very day, the Persian and the Median women of the nobility who have heard about the king's conduct will respond to all the king's nobles in the same way. There will be no end of disrespect and discord. Therefore, if it pleases the king, let him issue a royal decree, and let it be written in the laws of Persia and Media, which cannot be repealed. Vashti is never again to enter the presence of King Xerxes. Also, let the king give her royal position to someone else who is better than she. Then, when the king's edict is proclaimed throughout all his best realm, all the women will respect their husbands from the least to the greatest. The king and his nobles were pleased with this advice, so the king did as Memucan proposed. He sent dispatches to all parts of the kingdom, to each province in its own script, and to each people in their own language, proclaimed that every man should be ruler over his own household using his native tongue. Esther made queen. Chapter 2. Later, when King Xerxes' fury had subsided, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what he had decreed about her. Then the king's personal attendants proposed, let such be made for beautiful young virgins for the king. Let the king appoint the commissioners in every province of his realm to bring all these beautiful young women into the harem at the citadel of Susa. Let them be placed under the care of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the woman, and let beauty treatment be given to them. Then let the young woman who pleased the king be king instead of Vashti. This advice appealed to the king, and he followed it. Now there was in the citadel of Susa a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin, named Mordecai, son of Yair, the son of Simei, the son of Girish, who had been carried into exile from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, among those taken captive with Jehoiakim, king of Judah. Mordecai had a cousin named Hades, who he had brought up because she had neither father nor mother. This young woman, who was also known as Esther, had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Mordecai had taken her as his own daughters when her father and mother died. When the king's order and edict had been proclaimed, many young women were brought to the citadel of Susa and put under the care of Haggai. Esther also was taken to the king's palace and entrusted to Haggai, who had charge of the harem. She pleased him and won his favor. Immediately he provided her with her beauty, beauty and treatment and special food. He assigned to her 7 female attendants selected from the king's place, and moved her and her attendants into the best place in the harem. Esther had not revealed her nationality and family background because Mordecai had forbidden her to do so. Every day he walked back and forth near the courtyard of the harem to find out how Esther was and what was happened to her. Before young woman's turn came to go in to King Xerxes, she had to complete 12 months of beauty treatment prescribed for the woman. 6 months with oil of myrrh and 6 with perfumes and cosmetics. And this is how she would go to the king. Anything she wanted was given her to take with her from the harem to the king's palace. In the evening she would go there, and in the morning return to another part of the harem to the care of Shashgaz, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the concubines. She would not return to the king unless he was pleased with her and summoned her by name. When the turn came to Esther, the young woman Mordecai had adopted, the daughter of his uncle Abihail, to go to the king, and she asked for nothing other than what Haggai, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the harem, suggested, and Esther won the favor of everyone who saw her. She was taken to King Xerxes in the royal residence in the 10th month, the month of Tebes, in the 7th year of his reign. Now the king was attracted to Esther more than to any of the other women, and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other persons. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her king instead of Vashti, and the king gave a great banquet, Esther's banquet, for all his nobles and officials. He proclaimed a holiday throughout the province and distributed gifts with royal liberality. Mordecai uncovers a conspiracy. When the virgins were assembled a second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, but Esther had kept secret her family background and nationality just as Mordecai had told her to do. For she continued to follow Mordecai's instruction as she had done when he was bringing her up. During the time Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigdan and Teresi, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, became angry and conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. But Mordecai found out about the plot and told Queen Esther, who in turn reported it to the king, giving credit to Mordecai. And when the report was investigated and the ship to Mordecai, and when the report was investigated, credit to Mordecai, and when the report was investigated and found to be true, the two officials were impaled on poles. All this was recorded in the book of the annals in the presence of the king. Haman's plot to destroy the Jews. Chapter 3. After this event, King Xerxes honored Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, elevating him and giving him a seat of honor higher than that of all the other nobles. All the royal officials at the king's gate knelt down and paid honor to Haman, for the king had commanded this concerning him, but Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor. Then the royal officials at the king's gate asked Mordecai, "Why do you disobey the king's command?" Day after day they spoke to him, but he refused to comply. Therefore they told Haman about it, to see whether Mordecai's behavior would be tolerated, for he had told them he was a Jew. When Haman saw tolerated, for he had told them he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged, yet having learned who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Instead, Haman looked When Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged. Yet having learned who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Instead, Haman looked for a way to destroy all Mordecai's In the 12th year of the King Xerxes, in the first month, the month of Nisan, the pearl, that is, the lot was cast in the presence of Haman to select a day and month, and the lot fell on the 12th month, the month of Adar. Then Haman said to King Xerxes, "There is a certain people dispersed among the people in all the provinces. Their customs are different from those of all people and did not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate him. If it pleases the king, let decree be issued to destroy them, and I will give 10,000 talents of silver to the king's administrator for the royal treasury." And so the king took his signet ring from his finger and gave it to Haman, son of Hammedat, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. "Keep the money," the king said to Haman, "and do with the peoples as you please." Then on the 13th day of the first month, the royal secretaries were summoned. They wrote out in the script of each province and in the language of each people all Haman's orders to the king's satraps, the governor of the various provinces and the nobles of the various peoples. These were written in the name of King Xerxes himself and sealed with his own ring. Dispatched were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces with the order to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews, young and old, women and children. On a single day, the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so they would be ready for that day. The couriers went out spurred on by the king's command, and the edict was issued in the citadel of Susa. The king and Haman sat down to the king's command, and the edict was issued in the citadel of Susa. The king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was bewildered. Mordecai persuaded Esther to help. Chapter 4. When Mordecai learned of all that had been done, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the city, wailing loudly, bitterly. But he went only as far as the king's gate, because no one clothed in sackcloth was allowed to enter it. In every province to which the edict and the order of the king came, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing. Many lay in sackcloth and ashes. When Esther's eunuchs and female attendants came and told her about Mordecai, she was in great distress. She sent clothes for him to pawn on instead of its sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther summoned Hadak, one of the king's eunuchs assigned to attend her, and ordered him to find out what was troubling Mordecai and why. So Hadak went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate. Mordecai told him everything that had happened to him, including the exact amount of money Haman had promised to pay into the royal treasure for the destruction of the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the text of the edict for their annihilation, which he had been in Susa to show to Esther and presence to beg for mercy and prayed with him for her people, which had been published in Susa to show. He also gave him a copy of the text of the edict for their annihilation, which he had published in Susa, to show to Esther and explain it to her, and he told him to instruct her to go into the king's presence to beg for mercy and plead with him for her people. Hadak went back and reported to Esther what Mordecai had said. Then she instructed him to say to Mordecai, all the king's officials and the people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but on law that they be put to death, unless the king extended the gold scepter to them and spared their lives. But such days have passed since I was called to go to the king. When Esther was reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer: do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish, and who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai: go, gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law, and if I perished. So Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instruction. Esther's request to the king. Chapter 5. On the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace. In front of the king's hall, the king was sitting on his royal throne in the hall, facing the entrance. When he saw Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased with her and held out to her the gold scepter that was in his hand. So Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. Then the king asked, "What is it, King Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be given you." "If it please the king," replied, "let the king, together with Haman, come today to a banquet I have prepared for him." "Bring Haman at once," the king said, "so that we may do what Esther asks." So the king and Haman went to the banquet Esther and prepared. As they were drinking wine, the king again and asked again, "Now what is your petition? It will be given you, and what is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be granted." Esther replied, "My petition and my request is this: if the king regards me with favor, and it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to the banquet I will prepare for them. Then I will answer the king's question." Haman's rage against Mordecai. Haman went out that day happy and in high pleasure. But when he saw Mordecai at the king's gate and observed that he neither rose nor showed fear in his presence, he was filled with rage against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. Calling together his friends and Zeresh, his wife, Haman boasted to them about his vast wealth, his many sons, and all the ways the king had honored him, and how he had liberated him above the other nobles and officials. And that's not all. Haman added, "I am the only person Queen Esther invited to accompany the king to the banquet she gave, and she has invited me along with Calling together his friends and Zeresh, his wife, Haman boasted to them about his vast wealth, his many sons, and all the ways the king had honored him, and how he had liberated him above the other nobles and officials. And that's not all," Haman added in. "I'm the only person Queen Esther invited to accompany the king to the banquet as she gave, and she has invited me along with the kings tomorrow. But all this gives me no satisfaction as long as I see that the Jew Mordecai sitting at the king's gate." His wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, "Have a pole set up, reaching to a height of 50 cubits, and ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai impaled on it. Then go with the king to the banquet and enjoy yourself." This suggestion delighted Haman, and he had the pole set up.